Okay. Anyway, everyone, so welcome. And we are going to carry on. And what we are carrying on with is the famous Sāmaññaphala Sutta, the fruits of the ascetic life. In other words, if you like, the fruits of the monastic life. Why one would want to be an ascetic, why one want to be a monastic. And this very famous discourse, for those of you who were here from the beginning, is about starts off with King Ajātasattu, the famous king of Magadha, the beginning of the Magadhan Empire, which reaches the maximum size under Ashoka about 2.5 centuries later, and his remorse because of his killing of his father, the king Bimbisara. And so it is this kind of very interesting sutta which has a bit of history to it, a bit of tragedy to it, and then it has, of course, this beautiful teaching known as the gradual training. Gradual training in Pali usually is the pubba sikka. Sikka is training. 2 words for training in Pali. Sikka, actually there's a few words. One is sikka. Vinaya is another word for also means training. Anyway, Sikka, Vinaya, and other things. We are, because it goes through the entire training, the gradual training, it means it starts at the beginning. The beginning is, of course, the meeting of the Buddha. You meet the Buddha, and that's when you gain faith, you gain right view. So, in a very real sense, the gradual training, it mirrors the Noble Eightfold Path. You can see each factor of the path in the gradual training. So they follow each other almost perfectly. So the meeting of the Buddha is the rising of right view, and then you decide to go forth. And that is, of course, right intention, samma sankappa. And then you have all the factors of ethics, the samma vaca, samma kammanta, samma ajiva, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. We have looked at all of that in great detail. This has a very long section on this, and some of it seems to be a little bit commentarial in nature. And so now we're moving on to what is essentially samma vayama or samma padana, which is right effort on the Noble Eightfold Path. And as you can see, this is then sense restraint. And here it comes under under immersion, in other words, under samadhi. It is subsumed under samadhi. Samadhi is the broader heading, and sense restraint is like a subheading under samadhi. And you may wonder, what has sense restraint got to do with samadhi? Because sense restraint is often known as the indriya samvara sila, and sila is more like ethics, more like kind of good habits in our life. But here it comes under samadhi. And what that shows us is that these things can be looked at from slightly different points of view. And first thing to understand is that the headings here have been inserted later on. The Buddha didn't say samadhi heading. This is a later insertion by editors of the text. The same thing with sense restraint, also insertion by editors. But there is still a basis for saying that. You have in the I think it's in the Majjhima 44 or 43, either the Maha or the Chula Vedalla Sutta, where they talk about samadhi, and in there they say that the sense restraint or the right effort is a requisite of samadhi. It is a requisite because you use that right effort to overcome the bad qualities of mind, establishing the good ones, and so it becomes a requisite of samadhi, that which you use then to enable you to reach samadhi down the track. And so in this way, sense restraint can be looked at from these 2 different angles, either as an aspect of samadhi or as an aspect of virtue. Usually it means virtue. And of course the reason why it has to do with virtue is because sense restraint is all about reducing the defilements of the mind. And defilements, by the definition, whether they express themselves through speech or through action or through the mind, defilements are obviously an aspect of ethics. We want to have a pure mind, pure speech, pure actions, and that's kind of the idea behind this. So now we're moving away from the realm of body and speech into the realm of the mind. How to purify the mind. Yeah, this is very interesting. Yeah? Because most people can have an idea of what purification by body and speech is. Yeah, you act, you speak in a good way, you avoid the bad things. But purifying mind is much more. It's much more of a kind of a black box for most people. In other words, black box like an unknown. Yeah, something that you can't really penetrate properly. And so, for that reason, it's a very important part of this path to understand how this comes about. And sense restraint is a very important part of this. So I want to have a look at this particular thing in a little bit of detail. We'll see how much, not as much as I do on a retreat, because that's when we go into this in a great detail, but some of the similar ideas that we see on retreats. So let's just get started and see what the Buddha has to say about this. So the first thing here, he says, and how does a mendicant guard the sense doors? Guarding the sense doors, indriyesu, gutta dvara is the Pali. Yeah, dvara is a door, or a dvara is like an opening, an access point. Indriya are the senses. Gutta is guarded. So indriyesu gutta dvara is the Pali for this. And this is already quite interesting, actually, in many ways. For example, you have the idea of a sense door. Yeah, in English, that's not the normal idiom that we use. But in Pali, the idea of a door, something enters through a door. And in Pali, dvara is not a door as in a door panel, but it's a door as in a doorway. Yeah, doorway, an opening, a portal, if you like, that you go through. The kind of 6 portals. New translation. Okay. I never heard that one before. It's always nice to come up with something that no one else has said. That's when you feel really important, right? No one has said this before. I was the first one. That's how you make your ego become large very quickly. So maybe I shouldn't come up with anything new. That's better. Anyway, so it's like a portal that something goes through, yeah? And so the idea is that you guard those portals, you guard those doors, because if you allow the bad things to come through those doors, you are like a doorkeeper, yeah? But dovarika is the Pali word for a doorkeeper. So, dovaraka is a door person. So you are a doorkeeper in a sense, stopping those things that lead to bad qualities and building up or letting in those things that lead to wholesome qualities. That is kind of the metaphor here. Of course, in reality, it is not as simple as that, because sometimes the reality is that we go out to seek things. So it's not just things coming into us. Sometimes it is we actually seeking things. So we also go out of that door, seeking things in the world. Sometimes these sights, these sounds, or whatever, they stand on the threshold of the door wanting to come in, and you have to let them come in. Other times we actually go out of the door and look for things in the world. So there's a kind of two-way traffic going through this door. And so we are guarding things in both not going out and not allowing things to come in. And then we have the idea of the indriya, the indriyesu, which means in regard to the senses or sense faculties. And the word indriya is actually quite interesting, because indriya means like a power. Indriya is derived from the word, you have the king of the gods called don't do this. Okay. Okay, we'll see what happens. I have to move it a bit, otherwise it turns off. So Indriya, Inda, or Indra is like the god, the lord of the gods, yeah? And so it is like a lord, it's like a lordship. In other words, a power that you have over other, or have over some area or some beings or whatever it might be. And so Indriyas are a bit like that. They are like powers. But translated here as senses, sometimes translated as faculties, but they imply a certain power. And so when the reason why these things are called powers then is because they tend to overpower the mind. When you see something interesting, the mind really becomes overpowered by that sight or that sound. It becomes very important to you, and then it has a power over the mind in this way. And that's why we have to be careful, because it's very easy to become overpowered through these indriyas. And that's why we also have the idea of the panch indriya, the 5 indriyas, which are the 5 spiritual faculties. And these are faculties that empower the mind or give power to the mind. If you have the power of faith, it means that overcomes opposite qualities that may destroy that faith or may pollute the mind or whatever. So these are powers of the mind. So your senses are like powers in this way. So that's why we have to be very careful. Otherwise they will overpower our mind and we will be in thrall of those sense impressions that come through them. So we guard, we are guarded in these things. Gutta is the Pali word. So how does this happen? And so here we go. When a mendicant sees a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in the features and details. So this is how it begins. First of all, it starts with a mendicant, but of course it is relevant for everyone. It's the same practice for everyone. Mendicant here means a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, but it refers to everyone. So when you see a sight with the eye, what is it to see a sight with the eye? It basically means anything that comes through the eye. That kind of any image that comes through the eye. What is it again? I think it's just rupa. I think the Pali word is for sight here. So any form or anything that comes through the eye. You don't get caught up in the features and the details. And the features here is nimitta, like nimitta in the same word as you have nimitta in the meditation practice. Details are anuvyanjana. And so the idea here is that when you see something, either you can just get caught up in the general appearance, how things appear. Nimitta is the appearance of things, or some kind of detail. So anything within that thing that you see is what you get caught up in. So whatever it might be. It's kind of the idea is to broaden it out. And what does it mean to get caught up in these things? And the Pali word here is gahi. So it's nimitta gahi, anuvyanjana gahi. And gahi means like to grasp or to hold on to something. So you are grasping the object, or you are grasping a feature or detail of that object. So how does that manifest in reality? How does it manifest in your mind? The way it manifests is in your mind is that you see something and you can't let go of it. You keep on thinking about it. You obsess with it. That is how it kind of manifests in your mind. And so you see something nice, you go down the street, you see someone, maybe you see a person you don't like, and you, I got to cross the street now to avoid this person. And afterwards, because you remember that person, you don't want to talk to them, you kind of cross the street, okay, go. And then you avoid them, but they linger in your mind, because sometimes we have a bad impression, it lingers in our mind because of that. And then that is the idea of something, you are caught up in that, the mind has grasped onto that object. Or you see something you like, maybe you see someone and you think, wow, then you look at somebody and that kind of image of that person somehow remains in your mind after you see them. Or you see anything else that you like or you dislike, and it lingers in the mind afterwards. You can't just let it go. This is the mind grasping onto these things. And so this is the issue here. And this is an issue because if we grasp onto things like that, it means that we are not mindful and we're not really aware of what we're doing. We're not ready to kind of move on to the next thing. We are kind of stuck in our mind, so to speak, rather than being with what is happening. It's the opposite of mindfulness. We are dwelling on things in a certain way. So this is what we're trying to avoid. This kind of grasping on things. So then the Buddha says, if the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of covetousness and displeasure would become overwhelming. So if you're not careful with what you see, if you don't take some kind of action to avoid this idea of grasping onto all kind of things, in other words, if you're not restrained in what you're doing, then the bad qualities come. These are the akusala dhamma, that arise in the mind. Covetousness and displeasure, this is abhijja domanassa. Abhijja is basically just desire. So desire arises in the mind. And here is a fairly coarse form of desire, not a very refined kind of desire. And domanassa means literally do-manassa, bad mind. So it is like a negative, it's like an aversion or negative thing. Oh, I don't want to see that, And you kind of you get caught up in it precisely because you don't like it. So these are the two things that happen in our mind. This is not really not quite the same thing as ill will. It's a little bit different. This is just how we react to the sensory world. Either we like the things that we see, or we dislike them. The mind gets kind of pulled to something, or it pushes itself away from something. And this is what we're trying to avoid, so that we don't these bad qualities don't arise in the mind. This is what happens, and then we get caught up in it, and we kind of have a problem. So these things become overwhelming. Overwhelming means that you get caught in them. You're not able to let go. You carry them with you as you're walking along or whatever. So for this reason, they practice the restraint, protecting the faculty of sight and achieving its restraint. So to avoid this is where the idea of sense restraint, Indriya Sangvara Sila, or the Indriyesu Gutta Dvara, these are two words for the same idea. This is where this comes in. So we avoid that desire and aversion arising in the mind. So instead of having a mind which always is buffeted around, now desiring, now rejecting, we have a mind that is much more even. We go through the life with a kind of even mind. We kind of are ready for the next thing to happen. We have our mindfulness established, and then we have a more, we kind of have a better life basically, because you are more aware of what is going on. The mind is more, have a sense of power to it, a sense that you are able to deal with life instead of the life dealing with you. You are dealing with life. That's almost kind of a way of thinking about it. So you practice the restraint. And so what does that mean to practice restraint? And this is kind of where this gets interesting, because very commonly, and this is one of the things I always like to say at this point, very commonly when we think about restraint in English, we think about using willpower. And so at this point, the majority of people think, I've got to use willpower to overcome this. Don't look there, look away, That's bad, okay, that person, don't want to see them. Okay, look this way, cross the street, I don't have to see them. Crossing the street is not going to work usually, because they will still linger in your mind in a certain way. So how do we do this? And one of the very interesting things in the suttas is that even though it uses words that seem to imply willpower in this way, like restraint, sometimes it uses words that are much more powerful than restraint. It talks about obliterating or eliminating things. It sounds like very strong willpower in one way or another. But actually, the suttas don't really support the idea that this is about willpower. What it seems to be about, rather, is about using wisdom, being smart about how you do things. It is not, maybe sometimes we use a little bit of willpower, maybe sometimes you don't have that wisdom there to enable you to do these things, And so, because of that, then you sometimes maybe a little bit of willpower is okay, but generally speaking, you try your best of your ability to use wisdom instead of willpower. And normally, we'd use a lot of willpower. This is kind of the standard way of overcoming negative qualities in the mind, and so it really is a complete change of how we deal with things usually. And one of the suttas that always kind of stood out to me when I was and trying to understand how to deal with the bad qualities in whatever that might be, was the sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya 2. And that sutta says that there is two kinds of powers, and one is the power of patisankhana, which means like reflection, and the other one is the bhavana bala, patisankhana bala and bhavana bala. Bhavana is the development that usually refers to samadhi and deep meditation. Patisankhana means the power of reflection. And then it explains what these powers are for. And this was very interesting for me here, because the answer in that sutta, the power of reflection is for what? It is for giving up bad, unskillful qualities of body and speech. Okay, we expected that, yeah, you reflect, okay, don't do this, don't do that. But also in the mind, yeah, you give up mental bad qualities through the power of reflection. And then it goes on to the idea of meditation, or bhavana bala, which is meditation. It talks about the 4 jhanas, the 7 factors of awakening, and really the deep samadhi. And so what that means is quite obvious, is that whenever we want to overcome bad qualities in the mind, reflection is the most powerful tool, contemplation. And of course that is really an aspect of wisdom. It's wisdom power, not willpower. Yeah, it is also not meditation. If you have full of defilements in your mind, you sit down to meditate, it's not going to work. Yeah, why? Well, because your mind is not ready for that. You won't be able to watch the breath. You won't be able to do anything because the defilements are there, at all times. And so that is kind of a problem. Yeah, and so wisdom power is the way then to overcome defilements in the mind. And this is, I think, very fascinating already. So let's have a look at a couple of suttas that make this point. How do we use wisdom power, right, to overcome these defilements? I will show you a couple of suttas that make these points quite clear. So I'll just move on to those other suttas and see if I can find them here. See, it's all prepared for you. I've been working hard for you just to get this ready. So this is another sutta. This is called Majjhima Nikaya 152, called the Indriya Bhavana Sutta. Indriya Bhavana means the development of the faculties, the last sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. And this is how it talks about the development of faculties. And how, Ananda, is there the supreme development of the faculties in the training of the Noble One, the Aryasa Vinaya, the training of the Noble One. When a mendicant sees a sight with their eyes, this is exactly what we had before. You see a sight with their eyes, liking, disliking, and both liking and disliking come up in them. So when you see a sight with the eye, this is kind of the standard thing. Yeah, you like it or you dislike it, or you neither dislike it or you both dislike it and like it. Yeah, so this happens, and this happens so fast. You don't really have a time to avoid. You can't really avoid that. But then it is, how do we react to this? Do we react to this by allowing things to overwhelm our mind in terms of desire and aversion, or are we able to keep a neutral mind? Yeah, so this is the idea then. So now we want to keep a neutral mind. How do we do that? And this is what this next part is about. They understand liking, disliking, and both liking and disliking have come up in me. So first of all, you have to understand what is going on. The way to understand what is going on is you have to have a degree of mindfulness, and you have to know what liking and disliking are, even the subtle manifestations of these things. So you have a wherewithal, you know what's happening inside of you. It means you have a mindfulness of the mind. Some people will call this the citta anupassana, contemplation of the mind, but I would just call it sense restraint. So you know what's happening here. Then you think that is conditioned, coarse, and dependently originated. So this is how you deal with it. This is the wisdom faculty being used. Conditioned means that it arises because of certain conditions. Why you like something often is just random. It's because of the past. It's because of past lives. It doesn't mean that it has any inherent value at all. It's just the conditioning that you have been through. And this is how you end up liking things. And, you like different foods depending on where you were born. It's got nothing to do with those foods actually being inherently superior or inferior to any other foods. You like so many things in the world are like that. We like them because of conditioning. There's nothing inherently inherent about it, which is important. Your next life, you like something completely different. You like a different country. You like different people. Everything is completely changed. It's all very conditioned and all really kind of hollow and empty, really. There's nothing really there of any significance or importance. It's just conditioning. But what is worse is that not only is it conditioned, it is coarse. Yeah. And this is what makes it really interesting. Yeah. It is coarse. In other words, it's not refined. It is kind of vulgar almost. Yeah. It is it's unpleasant in a certain way because it doesn't have the refinement that often we would like to have in our lives. So the sense pleasures, the things that come through the senses are coarse in Buddhism. They don't provide anything that is really useful. They don't provide anything which is really sustaining in terms of happiness in the long run. It is actually not very interesting at all. There are things on the Buddhist path far more interesting than the objects of the senses. And of course, that is when we start to develop the path, initially just through kind of doing the right thing, living in a good way, being generous, but eventually through the development of the mental happiness coming through meditation practice. That is santang, that is panitang. Santang, panitang, 2 words you see throughout the suttas for something that is really worthwhile. Santang means peaceful, panitang means sublime, often translated as sublime. Something that's elevated, delightful and sublime and great. And so as long as we are messing around in the 5 senses, we're just dealing with coarse stuff. There's something far more interesting on this path than all of these coarseness that we have in our normal lives. And so it's useful to remember these things, because sometimes it seems so nice. You sit here in this hall, you think, actually this Buddhist Center actually is quite nice, especially sitting here. Have you ever sat here before? After this talk, come and sit here. When I've left, you come sit in and look out. It's actually very nice. First of all, you see nice people. That's number one. You won't see those because they will be gone when you sit here, but let's see nice people. Then you see kind of the large windows, seeing the park outside. It's actually quite pretty. But the Buddha said it's coarse. So it's still coarse in a sense, even though it is delightful in so many ways. Of course, here there's a kind of spiritual infusion that makes it particularly delightful to sit here in the Buddhist society, but nevertheless. So this is useful to remember because the world can be very alluring, and it can seem very attractive, but actually, no, at the end of the day, it is coarse, and for that reason it is problematic. And not only is it coarse, but if you buy into that coarseness, it blocks you from accessing those refined and sublime experiences that actually are available on the Buddhist path. Then it says that it is conditionally originated. Not only is it conditioned from the past, and so that what you like and what you dislike is completely random, really, but it is dependently originated. It means that it arises even now. It may stay for a while, and then things change. We're here for a while, and then an earthquake comes and it demolishes the entire Buddhist society center here. Bang, it's gone, and you realize it was dependently originated. It was here because of cause and conditions. The cause and conditions changed, and then it's gone. People are dependently originated. Every one of us, we are here for a while. One day we die, and we are gone. And this is such a scary thing about the world. This is one of the really, really scary things. I was been looking recently at a sutta called the Anicca Sanya Sutta. The sutta on the perception of impermanence. And it says in that sutta that perception of impermanence, first of all, it is lauded as being the primary perception we should develop. It's like the peak of the roof, holding all the rafters together, like the king, the wheel-turning monarch over all small monarchs in the world. It's the peak of perceptions. And that perception of impermanence, if you use it for the 5 sense world, this world around us, you can see how that 5 sense world is so utterly unreliable, so utterly it's really concerning how unreliable and how dangerous it is if you tie yourself up with that world and you're attached in that world, because you never know what's going to happen around the corner. It is dependently originated. It will last for a while. It will be gone again. And you cannot, in the end of the day, you can't control that world. The problem is that it feels like we have a bit of control. That's why we buy into that world. If I can go to the supermarket, I can buy whatever I want. Go to the monastery, I can choose whatever I want on the table in the monastery. It's pretty. The table in the monastery is pretty amazing. For those of you who've been there, it feels like you're in control, right? But what happens one day? Ajahn Brahmali dies, and then nobody comes to the monastery anymore. This is the greatest fear of the monks. If Ajahn Brahm dies, the food will decline in the monastery. So I don't think that will happen too. It will happen a little bit, right? Because Ajahn Brahm is obviously, for very good reason, very popular here. And people come there to feel his presence, to feel his sense of peace, to feel his, if you like it, charisma. I'm not sure if charisma is quite the right word, but the spiritual qualities. And so, of course, things will change dramatically if he doesn't come. And that is another aspect of impermanence. So all of these things, this five sense world is very, very conditioned. And the more you understand that, the more you kind of let go of that world. You develop the Dhammaloka anabhirati sanya, the perception of non-delight in the whole world. Primarily the five sense world, because it is so uncertain. And then when you think about these things in this way, you don't attach to people anymore. Okay, this person coming down the street that maybe you don't like so much, okay, they are impermanent anyway. I see them for a few seconds, then they're gone. Why am I making so much out of this? And maybe tomorrow they're friendly. Maybe they will change. Who knows what's going on? There's no reason to hold on to these things. The person who is very nice, who you like, okay, they will also change. And they suddenly, one day they're gone. There's no, why am I thinking about this? In any case, I'm not really interested in that friendship or whatever, or relationship or whatever it might be. So you just let it go. You understand how uncertain all of these things are. And then it says, but this is peaceful and sublime. Actually, that was what I just said before. This santang panitang, namely equanimity. And so here we have the idea of upekkha equanimity, and here it is used in the lower sense of this particular word. This word upekkha has usually a very lofty meaning, and usually it is a meaning that you find used to describe the jhanas, in particular the third and the fourth jhana. They are said to have the upekkha in them, the equanimity. And that's usually what it means. You also have the upekkha as one of the four Brahma Viharas, the four divine abidings. But here it is used as the ordinary upekkha of everyday life, where the mind is kind of even throughout your life. You move through life in a smooth way without kind of being always kind of going up and down all the time. And you have a sense of being in charge of your life. And that's a very nice feeling when you feel that you are in charge instead of the world being in charge of you. You feel like there's a degree of control. Of course, that is also another illusion, but at least it is a higher kind of. It's more of a control anyway than there was before, because before you are just the recipient of all of these things, and your mind just reacts automatically to whatever is happening here. And so, when you are able to do this properly and think in this way, then the disliking, the liking, and both liking and disliking that come up in them cease, and equanimity becomes stabilized. It is like how a person with clear eyes might open their eyes and then shut them, or might shut their eyes and then open them. Such is the speed, the swiftness, the ease with which any liking, disliking, and both liking and disliking at all that came up in them cease, and equanimity becomes stabilized. So here the idea of doing it fast, or knowing straight away that this is dangerous. I think this is an important point. Very often, if you have to use too much reflection to be able to do this, it very often will not work. It will be too late. This object will already have overcome your mind. It just happens. You are completely submerged by these things. And so you have to have developed these things beforehand. You have to know the danger in these things. And then you apply that knowledge. This is the idea of using wisdom. You apply that wisdom at that particular time, and then you overcome it. You don't actually learn that wisdom on the spot, because then it's usually too late. And if you don't learn it on the spot and you get overwhelmed, well, then maybe you can reflect on that later on and realize the danger in those things. So this is then how you would use it in the right way here. So this is a nice sutta, the Indriya Bhavana Sutta. And so there you are. So let's have a look at another sutta, which is similarly very interesting to my mind. And this is a sutta that I teach every time I teach a meditation retreat, because it shows this very, very well what is going on. And this is the Dveda Vitakka Sutta, the two kinds of thought, Majjhima Nikaya number 19. And so here we have a person, who is meditating, or not necessarily meditating, just in ordinary life. They are heedful, they are keen, they are resolute. And then as you do that, a sensual thought, or a thought related to the five senses arises. You are attracted or repelled by something in the five senses. And then this is the Buddha talking about his own experience before his awakening, how he practiced the path. And these suttas are, to my mind, often very inspiring, very interesting. And of course, the Buddha is saying that we should be doing the same thing as he did before his awakening. And so he says, I understood this sensual thought has arisen in me. So this is the first thing again. You have enough awareness to know what is going on. This is what we mean when ordinary people talk about mindfulness. This is what they mean. Mindfulness means having awareness of what is happening with you. What are your emotions? What are your reactions to the world? The mindfulness that ordinary people talk about is not the mindfulness required for meditation. That's a much higher state. This is a lower kind of meditation where you have enough idea of what is happening so that you can adjust your mind, adjust the way you think about things. So you know a sensual thought has arisen in you. You are attracted to something, or you are rejecting something, the two sides of the coin. And of course that knowledge, if you want to have it fully, it means that you also understand all the various degrees of sensuality. Later on you have the same kind of idea for ill will and also for harmfulness. So these are the three kinds of bad thought. You understand all of these thoughts in the same way. So sensual thoughts, ill will thoughts, harmful thoughts. So you know that these things have arisen in you, even to the smallest degree. Small irritations are part of the idea of ill will, for example. And then this is how you overcome it. First of all, it has arisen in me. It leads to my own suffering. It leads to the suffering of others. It leads to the suffering of both. It blocks wisdom. It is on the side of anguish or suffering or whatever, and it leads away from extinguishment, away from nibbana. This is what you think. And when you think like this, when I reflected that it leads to hurting myself, it went away. This is how simple it is. If you fully understand that applying your mind to this sensory thought and having an interest in it, grasping it, rejecting it, if you understand that you're actually hurting yourself, you won't do it. It will just be gone just like that. And what this shows you, if this isn't happening with you, it means that your insight into the five-sense world still hasn't really matured properly. It is not very profound yet. You may have some insight into it, but when you have the full insight into that world, you let it go straight away. You have no interest anymore, because you know it leads to suffering down the track. Every time you attach to these things, then you have to let go, because nature will take it back. The famous simile of the grass torch in the suttas is a simile for the five-sense world. When you take up a grass torch, if you pick up a grass torch in the wrong way and you hold it against the wind, a grass torch full of embers, before you know it, you are ablaze. You are burning. And that is the problem with grasping the sensual pleasures in the wrong way. They will burn you and they will cause suffering. The world is ablaze, the world is burning. And this is what you're seeing here. And so that, straight away you let go, because you understand you are hurting yourself by grasping onto these things. This gives you an idea of what contemplation does when it's very powerful. And it gives you an idea of what you may have to do to get to this particular point. When I reflected that it leads to hurting others, it went away. Because when you are hurting others, it is not nice to hurting others. If you want to avoid hurting others, then you also, again, you let it go. If you are a person who has compassion, you don't want to hurt anyone in the world, then it's a bad idea. And so again, taking the full kind of the full benefit of these sort of reflections again makes these things actually go away completely. When I reflect that it leads to both hurting others and once myself, to hurting both, then again it goes away. So obviously that is even more powerful. When I reflected that it blocks wisdom, panya nirodhika, it makes wisdom cease. It's on the side of anguish, and it leads away. It's not that it doesn't lead to extinguishment, it leads away from extinguishment. That's how I would translate that. It went away. Yeah, you can see why. If it blocks wisdom, or it leads to the ending of wisdom, it has suffering within it, and it leads in the opposite direction of the path, then obviously it is bad. And so you understand that, and then it goes away. So this is the reflections that we're supposed to do. This is the idea of the wisdom power, understanding the downside of these things. And again, understanding the downsides of something like ill will and anger is kind of fairly easy. We can probably all do that to some extent. Understanding the downside of being harmful, again, we can do that. But understanding the downside of the five sense world, that is actually more difficult. And so it takes some degree of reflection to do that. And also it takes some degree of finding happiness in the spiritual realm. Because without some kind of happiness somewhere, you're just going to flounder. We all need to have something in this world that is meaningful to us, and that includes the some kind of happiness for ourselves. So this is the idea of how to use wisdom to achieve sense restraint. And there are lots of suttas that talk about this sort of thing, how to deal with the defilements of the mind. You find them in a number of places, and all of those things are then just an expansion really on this theme, how to overcome these problems. Like the Potalya Sutta, of the similes of the sense pleasures, or you have the Vitaka Santana Sutta, the overcoming of thoughts, and all of these kind of things. They are basically on this particular theme, and so use that to help you overcome these things. So that is the basic idea of sense restraint. Anyone have any thoughts on this? Please, yeah? Yeah, it is also related to 6 as well, actually. Okay. We'll see that in a second. Okay. Because when you dream about sense pleasures, that's the mind doing that dreaming. So, Yeah,
can I also make a comment about reflection and contemplation? So I find that because wisdom is experiential, when you're doing the reflecting, you have to think about some experience you had, because it's experiential, and then try to then apply what you learn from coming here or in a book and think, well, what happened then? Whereas is contemplation more in the moment? Like reflection is looking back, and then contemplation is like as it's happening, you're catching yourself?
I think they are very closely related. And I think that even if you are contemplating in the present, the reason why you're able to contemplate in the present is because of past experiences. You are somehow relating it to that. So I think past experience is always a part of this. Without those past experiences, you don't have anything to relate it to. But so I would say there are, I mean, reflection is like a mirror, so maybe you can say that it has, anyway, I'm not as I think they're very closely related to each other, But I'm sure that there is a dictionary difference. If you go to the dictionary, you can probably find some difference between the two. I probably can, but I use them synonymously myself. Anyone else want to say anything about this? No? Okay. All right then, that's good. So let us... Let's move on. So we come back to the main sutta again. So Yeah, so now you know what it means, roughly, when they practice its restraint, protecting the faculty of sight and achieving its restraint. This is what it refers to, trying to use wisdom to overcome it. Sometimes you may have to use a little bit of willpower, but much better to use wisdom power, because that actually overcomes it much more powerfully than you can do by using willpower. And then the same thing happens also with the other senses. So when they hear a sound with their ears, when they smell an odor with their nose, when they taste a flavor with the tongue, when they feel a touch with their body, and here you have when they know an idea with their mind. So here as the idea, the mind things. So what is meant by idea here, or mental object, or whatever you want to call it, the Pali word is Dhamma. Here it relates to ideas that usually have to do with the five sense world. So this is the mind taking up the five sense world. Like if you think about something in that realm, or you dream about it or whatever. Whereas the previous ones is more like direct input through the five senses. This is the five senses as, if you like, regurgitated in the mind. It does not refer to things like. Maybe it does actually. I wonder whether it refers to also, let's say you have a very peaceful experience in a meditation, and then you kind of afterwards you grasp onto that. It could also refer to that as well, I suppose. So maybe it refers more broadly to whatever happens in the mind. So you then get caught up in the feature and details. If the faculty of mind were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of desire and aversion would become overwhelming. For this reason, they practice the restraint, protecting the faculty of mind and achieving its restraint. When they have this noble sense restraint, they experience an unsullied bliss inside themselves. So, if you remember when we were looking at the ordinary virtue, or ordinary morality, or ordinary sila, it says that you experience a bliss, a blameless bliss, when you have that kind of ordinary virtue, because you're acting in the wrong way towards other people, and because you're acting in the right way, you feel blameless in how you're dealing with people in the world. But if your mind still has those bad qualities, the bliss isn't pure, the happiness isn't pure, because the mental qualities, they sully or contaminate or pollute or corrupt that bliss somehow. So if you want to have an unsullied bliss that is more pure, then you also have to have a pure mental state. And I'm sure many of you will know exactly what that means. If you have some negative emotions, then they pollute the mind in a bad way. And so now we're moving up the ladder of happiness to a higher degree of happiness, the happiness that comes also from having a degree of sense restraint. This is what this is about. That is how a mendicant guards the sense doors. So that is the Indriya Sangvara Sila, or the Indriyesu Gutta Dvara, as it is called in this particular case. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good. So people are nodding. So they means that they approve. Hopefully. Yeah. So okay. Let's go on to the next section then. In that case. So next section is called mindfulness and situational awareness. So this is the idea, translation of the Pali words sati sampajanya. And the idea here of situational awareness, the reason why Bhante Sujato translates it in this way, is that this particular section now is about how we understand how to live in the various how to act, how to reflect on the various situations that we find ourselves in daily life. Yeah, especially here we're talking about monasticism, and so these are the situations you find yourself in when you are not meditating. Yeah, so how to reflect when you are walking into the village for alms, when you come into Dhammaloka Center to give a teaching. Yeah, when you are kind of doing all kind of things, when you're using the internet, when you're talking to other people, all of these things. Yeah, how do you have situational awareness about these things? So you use these things in the appropriate way that aligns with the Dhamma. This is kind of the idea here. That's why it's called situational awareness, because it depends on the situation you are in. You apply the mind in the right way to understand that situation properly. And so mindfulness and situational awareness is what this is about. And you see here it comes immediately after sense restraint, which is kind of which is interesting. In some suttas, it comes before sense restraint. You have sati sampajanya, then sense restraint. So this, this is kind of this is a little bit random. So why is that? Why does it come in different places? And that, I think, is because the Dhamma is not like, these things have various degrees to them. They come in various strengths. And so there is sati sampajanya that is more basic, and that comes then before sense restraint. You have to have some idea what's going on before you can even restrain the senses, some idea why you're doing it. Otherwise you wouldn't even bother restraining the senses if you didn't have some kind of plan about how you want to live your life or whatever. So that's why sati sampajanya comes first. Or, as you have it here, first of all, you have some degree of sense restraint. You're trying that. And then the second thing, if you really want to purify that, is to have clarity throughout your life about why you're doing things. And then that enables the sense restraint to reach a higher level. Something like that, So it's a little bit random what comes first and what comes afterwards. But what it shows is that both of these are aspects of right action, not right action, or right effort. Because they come, one comes before the other, or the other comes before the other one, and so they kind of, they work together in a sense. That's kind of the idea here, I think. And so both of these are really about right effort. Yes, Hui Tong.
I wonder when the mindfulness is before the sense restraint in that context, is the mindfulness more in terms of the ability to remember the teaching and to apply that in the moment, so that the sense restraint can come in, because most often for Puthujjana, we've already totally forgotten about the teaching in the heat of the moment, and we like or dislike, or both liking and disliking, and only the remembering the teaching only comes later. I know you have already lost the plot. I think remembering the teaching is certainly part of it, because when you remember the teaching, you also remember what you're supposed to be doing right now. They kind of always come together, right? They're not really separate from each other. So I would say that's part of it. But it's but remembering the teaching, it's. When it comes to mindfulness, situational awareness is understanding why you're doing something. So you are kind of, okay, I am going into the city, and so you have clarity about that when you're going in. It doesn't mean that you are aware of the teaching all the time. You kind of establish the mind. At other times, it's good to be aware of the teaching all the time. Maybe you're contemplating a particular theme, and you can do that continuously. Or when it comes to sense restraint, you have to have more continuous awareness, because you have to be aware that things can happen at any time. So the kind of awareness you have will depend a little bit on what you're trying to do, and the kind of the circumstance, and the degree to which you remember the teachings as well will depend on the situation. But these things are all related to each other, Sure.
So one way or another they come together, So these things are slightly, they come at different times, and they're very closely related to each other, and basically they are related to right effort. That's why they come at this particular point, and that's why sometimes one comes first, other times the other one comes first. But what is also very interesting about sati sampajanya, and one of the things that kind of is worthwhile discussing very briefly, although I have discussed it here before, just bring it up very briefly again, is that this particular passage we're going to see now is also found inside the Satipatthana Sutta.
Yeah, inside the Satipatthana, you find exactly the same passage. But of course, if it is in the Satipatthana Sutta, it means it is about right mindfulness, not about right effort. And so it looks like you have Sati Sampajanya both as right effort and also as right mindfulness. And so that kind of makes you wonder, because usually these passages, they belong in one place, not another one. They're not usually kind of in many different places at once. This is not what we find. And that kind of brings up the investigation. What could there be that there has been a development here over time in the suttas, so that now it is found in two different places, whereas originally it was only found in one place. And some people have done some very interesting historical studies about this, like Bhante Sujato and Venerable Analayo, and the general consensus is that this actually belongs more likely to right effort than it belongs to Satipatthana. And that has a very interesting consequences. Because if it belongs to Satipatthana practice, it is right mindfulness, then it means that it is an awareness that you should have all the time. It means that you should have kind of a continuous awareness, because that's what right mindfulness is about. It's about meditation. It's about developing the mind in mindfulness. And so that means that it is a meditation subject. But if it belongs to right effort, it is not a meditation subject so much as a way of achieving the restraint of the mind. So it's more a general way of thinking about the world. And this changes the way we look at this quite dramatically. And I will show you in a second. You will see very soon why this actually matters and why this is interesting. So this is Sati Sampajanya. So let's have a quick look at this formula without maybe going into too much details. So how does a mendicant have mindfulness and situational awareness? How does it have Sati Sampajanya? It's when a mendicant acts with situational awareness when going out and coming back, when looking ahead and looking aside, when bending and extending the limbs, when bearing the outer robe, bowl and robes, when eating, drinking, chewing and tasting, when urinating and defecating, when walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, waking, speaking and keeping silent. That's how a mendicant had mindfulness and situational awareness. Now you will notice something very strange here. And this is why this translation doesn't really work. So I wrote to Bhante Sujato and told him off. Not really, that's not exactly right. But that's how I like to think of myself, as going around telling people off. So you notice here, you act with situational awareness, right? And then down here it has when sleeping. So the idea here is that while you are sleeping, you have situational awareness. That seems to be saying what it's saying, right? So you have mindfulness and clear awareness, or situational awareness, when you are sleeping, while you are sleeping. It doesn't make any sense. When you're sleeping, you're out of it. You can't have situational awareness. It's impossible. Because you're not there. You are kind of off maybe some other land somewhere, and maybe you have some kind of situational awareness there, but not here right now about when you're sleeping. It doesn't fit. With how the world operates. And the reason for that is because I think the translation here is not quite correct. And you will notice this word when. That is the problem. It is not when sleeping. The correct translation here is about sleeping. Once you call it about sleeping or in regard to sleeping, it changes the whole idea. And the reason why it is when sleeping is precisely because you find this passage in the Satipatthana Sutta, and because it is a meditation object, then when sleeping makes sense, because you have to have mindfulness all the time. So mindfulness when you are sleeping, the whole thing kind of doesn't hold together. And so the idea that this is about sense restraint and that the translation should be about rather than when, then it changes the whole paradigm. And then this passage starts to make really good sense. It is about sleeping. In other words, how much should you sleep? What kind of bed should you have? What is appropriate to kind of feel, so you feel nice and awake and mindful in the morning. You're not actually just oversleeping or undersleeping and all these kind of things. So you have situational awareness, a clear awareness about the appropriate amount and how to sleep. Then the whole thing comes together and it starts to make sense. So having this as part of the Satipatthana Sutta doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really belong there because of these kind of problems. And then you also have to change your translation. And I was very happy to say that I was indeed able to convince Bhante Sujato that that was not a good idea the way it was. So he has changed this in a later translation, but it hasn't made its way through yet to Sutta Central. It takes a while before these things get updated, etc. Because it's quite obvious in a way. Now, let's go back to the beginning and change the translation and see what it looks like if you change the translation, yeah? It is when a mendicant acts with situational awareness about going out and coming back. So this is the idea of a mendicant or monastic going into the village or coming back from the village. So you know why you are going in. It's not that you are continuously aware, but you have a general awareness about the idea of going in and coming back. Am I doing it for the right reason? Why am I doing this? Yeah, and so you know you're doing it to obtain alms food or whatever, not any other reason. And so you then follow that purpose through as you go on that alms round in the village. When looking ahead or looking aside, yeah, same kind of thing. You don't look away randomly at all kind of things. You know why you're doing it. Usually looking out for if anyone wants to give alms. Yes, you look and then you see, okay, they want to give something. Okay, so then you approach those people. When bending and extending the limbs, this again like things like putting out your alms bowl. You do that when someone wants to give, and you don't do it for any other kind of dodgy reason. About bending and extending the limbs. About bearing the outer robe, the bowl and robes. Yeah, here it makes really good sense to have about, because it is about bearing the robe in the right way, putting the robe on in the right way when you are about to enter the village, carrying these things appropriately. Yeah, this is the meaning of these things. And when doing it, that doesn't really make sense. Does that mean that what are you going to be mindful of your robes, of your bowl at all times? It's kind of a bit strange, but about makes very, very good sense in that kind of situation. When eating, drinking, chewing and tasting, it is about the eating. It is about eating the right amount, the right kind of quality of food, drinking the right kind of thing, yeah, so that you have maximum awareness. You don't drink too much or eat too little or whatever, but you do things in the right quantities. This is another one which is very interesting, because in the Buddhist world, when you travel around, very often you go on a retreat and they will say, be mindful while you eat. Why? Because it says in the Satipatthana Sutta. Actually, probably it never said in the Satipatthana Sutta, yeah? So that whole idea of kind of eating with mindfulness, eating, chewing, this kind of idea seems to be a later addition to the Satipatthana Sutta when this was added there. But if it belongs to right effort, it is more about your general attitude towards these things, understanding the right way. And that makes far more sense to me when you think about it like that. It changes a whole paradigm of how we think about meditation once you start to understand how the suttas are constructed and how sometimes things have changed a little bit over time. Please, yeah. Yeah.
I sort of agree with the word when might need to get changed, but I believe that when you have mindfulness, and I think this comes from Buddha's words, for continuous 7 days, I think Buddha says you will become automatically fully enlightened. Yeah. So I think I sort of agree to disagree with you in some aspect. It's not about how much you eat. It is being aware that you're eating and the process of it, so that you are always in your mind and body, and every action, every feeling, because it's that feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, that you can actually see the wisdom of impermanence and grasping. So I think it has to be a continuous thing in the process of. So I think the word when probably isn't the best. I don't know what word would be, but I think it encompasses what you're saying. It's about as well as in the process of doing those things, you're aware.
Yeah. So it's not that you're not supposed to be mindful when you're eating, but it's what you're mindful of, And the purpose of being mindful is largely to know what defilements are in your mind, so that you keep a pure mind. This is what is really important in ordinary life. This is why we have sense restraint. You want to have that purity. If you have that purity, then when you come to sit down on your cushion, you will be ready to watch the breath, ready to do metta meditation, all of these kind of things. So it's not so much awareness of the eating. It's awareness. It's more about the awareness is more focused on what is happening in your mind at that particular time. And to be able to keep a pure mind, it is also very important to understand how to eat the right thing. So very often you are told that, okay, be aware of the food, be aware of the eating. That's not the main point. The main point is to be aware of your reaction to that eating. That is what is important. And that reaction is what enables you to keep a pure mind. And that's why it belongs under right effort, not under right mindfulness. That's where it is, because it is about what we're doing in ordinary life. Right mindfulness is all about meditation practice. That's what happens when you sit down, you cross your legs, you watch your breath or whatever. That's really right mindfulness. Daily activities are not, it seems, as I understand the suttas, it's not really called meditation. Daily activities is really all about the idea of the effort on the path. And I think this is what comes out of this understanding what where these things belong on the path. It changes a little bit the paradigm of how you look at these things. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware while you're eating. It just means that the way you are aware is a little bit different and what you're focusing on. And especially when it comes to sleeping, it doesn't make any sense anymore. You cannot be aware when you're sleeping, so it must have a different meaning. And once you change sleeping, well then the when has to be changed throughout, because the grammatical form of this is the same throughout. And once the grammatical form is the same, you have to translate it in the same way. Otherwise, you're being inconsistent in your translations. So, yeah.
Yes. Would situational awareness also mean sort of being aware that you're not stepping on insects or snakes or bumping your head on a low-hanging branch and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, that's part of it. That would be part of it, So all of those things, avoiding things to be avoided, is called, I think it's in the Sāmaññaphala Sutta, is called avoidance, actually. You avoid the cesspit, you avoid the cliff, you avoid a wild elephant and a snake. It's all actually mentioned in there. So that's kind of part of it, Ananda? Yeah.
Ajahn, I think the word, two comments. About must be more appropriate in my view, because the reason is that when you eat, not only at the time of eating, especially at the retreat or when we go to the monastery or something, so much of food, so we have to think about it, what to get, and the quantity and all that. So it's about eating, not just at the time of eating. So it's going to the village for alms round, just before going, got to be aware of what you have to do, wear the robe properly, all that, I think. So therefore I think I concur with your suggestion. And also again that word sleeping, it's the sayano, isn't it?
Sutte. Sutte is the word.
Then it is particularly word sleeping. I thought then if it is sayano, we could have used lying down.
No, it's sutta. It specifically means sleeping.
I was going to say that the sleeping there is another word, sutta. So and then we can. Thank you.
People have tried to get around that by saying when you're falling asleep and those kind of things. But falling asleep is a different word in Pali, so this doesn't really work. So.
Ajahn, basically it looks like every moment, anything you do, it's all covered in here, isn't it? Is there any exception to?
Is there any? You were trying to get out of the situational awareness.
Be mindful.
Everything is covered. So it's when you are doing your meditation practice, then you're actually doing samasati. So that's kind of the seventh factor. But in ordinary life, you're not really doing samasati, and this is kind of the point. You're doing samavayama, samapadana, right effort. That's what kind of the thing. So everything is really covered. So you should ideally always have awareness of what you're doing.
Every moment.
Not necessarily every moment, but a general awareness of why you're doing things.
Yeah, something connected with the previous one. I didn't ask that question at that time. Yeah. I've heard that your thoughts coming into your eye, visions come into your eye and then it becomes a thought process, takes only fraction of a second. And call it chittakshana. Chittakshana means very, very minute time period. And also, two things can't happen at the same time. Seeing and hearing do not happen at the same time. But we see it, we feel it as one because it is so quick, changes one to the other. Is that right? I'm just asking your comment.
Yeah, first of all, it happens very fast, yes indeed, but it takes a while before it obsesses the mind. So you have a bit of time, seeing the process happening, strengthening itself, and that's where the sense restraint comes in. The longer you obsess over it, the more powerful the desire or aversion become, and so you have a chance to use the wisdom faculty, at some point in there. So you can see the liking becoming strong, and then that is when you kind of do that. As for hearing and seeing at different times, yes, everything. You can only have one thing happening at the time, but as you say, it happens so fast. It kind of blurs together into one thing. And all of these objects, whether it's the eye or the ear or whatever it is, all of that is ultimately also taken up by the mind. So the mind also experiences those things. And that's kind of what creates even more of a sense of unity, because the mind is always behind that. So you see it through the eye, and then the mind also takes that same object. You think about it, or you experience it very quickly afterwards. And that's how it becomes kind of solidified and becomes one person who experiences this kind of thing. That's what it seems like anyway.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. So, so let's just, let me just kind of finish off this idea, these things. So, the main point here is that I'm trying to make is that when you look at the way the Satipatthana Sutta and the suttas how they have, first of all, how the Satipatthana Sutta has developed, but also this idea that Sati Sampajanya is found in different places, you really have to come to the conclusion that it belongs under right effort rather than under right mindfulness. And that changes the way we think about it. It no longer becomes so much a meditation object, but it becomes a way of restraining the mind, to making sure the mind is left in purity. That's kind of the main argument behind this. And I think it is a fairly solid argument, to be honest. I don't think it's entirely, it's not based on nothing, so to speak. So then eating, drinking, chewing and tasting becomes again mostly about how to do this. Same thing with toilet business. And then when walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, waking, speaking and keeping silent, the idea of doing these things in the right way, not talking too much, not talking too little, not sleeping too much, not sleeping too little, but knowing the right quantity and how to go about these things. And then at the end of the day, the mindfulness is mostly then placed on the mind, what is happening in the mind. So when you do these things for the right reasons, you are minimizing the problem. But of course, the mind may still sometimes take up unwholesome qualities, unwholesome objects, and then the defilements arise as a consequence. So that's why it goes together with the right effort in this particular way here. That is how the mendicant has mindfulness and situational awareness, sati sampajanya. So let's have a look at a few more questions. Okay, dear Ajahn, how do we let go of the sensory world without feeling too forced or too restricted? I still find myself love traveling here. Okay, so again, the idea is that you don't let go of it through willpower. This is kind of the whole point. And if you don't let go through willpower, then you will not feel restricted. Because that restriction comes because you're trying to force it to happen rather than actually allowing it to happen naturally. So the idea is to reflect on that world, to reflect that actually it is not really satisfactory, it is not very interesting, it is always going to let you down, it is always problematic.
Yeah, and traveling, how interesting is it? The Buddha says just now the five sense world is coarse. Okay, you get to see different mountains, you get to see, the kind of slightly different food, you get to hear different languages and maybe slightly different ideas or whatever, but it's kind of just, variations on the same theme of the five senses. There's nothing really fantastically different about anything. What is fantastically different is the spiritual path. That really is fundamentally different, especially when you go into the deeper stages of what this path is about. And so you just keep on reflecting on these things. And as you do that, your mind will naturally turn away more from that five sense world, which just means you're less interested. It doesn't mean you have negativity necessarily towards it. You're just less interested. And as you are less interested in that world, then the spiritual path kind of opens up at the same time. But if you love traveling, keep on traveling until you get fed up with traveling, then stop traveling. Okay, dear Ajahn, is contemplation more feelings inside coming to the mind than thinking over a special happening? Contemplation more the feeling inside coming to the mind than thinking over a special happening. Contemplation is understanding the world. Contemplation means you look at what's happening in the world. Look at what's happening to the human body. People die. That's contemplation. Wow, people die. I forgot about that. I will die. When will I die? Now? Soon? Who knows? That's contemplation. I don't know when I'm going to die, so I better get my act together. This is called Maranasati, contemplation of death. Maranasanya. You look at what's happening in the world. You think, what's going to happen to the world? Where are we heading? Very uncertain. Many things seem to be going funny in the world. So what can you rely on that world? If you feel sad because things are going bad in the world, well then you are attached to the world. That's why you're feeling sad, and that's why you need to let go. You are finding a refuge where you should not find a refuge. That's the problem. So this is what contemplation means. Thinking about life in the right way. Everything in the world teaches you. And so if by looking at the world with the right eyes, you see how unsatisfactory and problematic and unreliable it is. And that's kind of the idea here. And what happens is that you start becoming less interested in that world. You reject it a little bit. It can maybe be a little bit painful to do this reflection, because it is painful precisely because you have been holding on to it. And then you are forced to let go. And that being forced to let go can be difficult sometimes. And this is why it is can be a bit difficult. But this is what contemplation means. It means looking at things in the right way. And the contemplation of impermanence and unreliability is the most basic of those contemplations. Seeing these things in the world. Dear Ajahn, is the difference between about and when also a difference between Mahayana and Theravada? Are the differences of interpretation a cause for different Buddhisms? It is not about difference between Mahayana and Theravada. It is just a difference in mainly in how the Satipatthana Sutta is understood. One of the very interesting things about the Satipatthana Sutta, and this was a long book written by Bhante Sujato called The History of Mindfulness, in which he takes up the various versions of the Satipatthana Sutta. It is found in about 7 different versions. One is the Theravada version, one is Sarvastivadin version translated into Chinese, another one is another translation into Chinese, which we don't know the school affiliation, but perhaps Mahasangika affiliation. Then there are 3 versions in the Abhidhamma, one in the Theravada Abhidhamma, one in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma, one in the Dhammaguptaka Abhidhamma. The last 2 are preserved in Chinese. And then there is a version also in the Mahayana Sutta, the Prajnaparamita Sutta, is also found a version of Satipatthana. And maybe it is even found in different places. Now, what is interesting very often in Buddhism, when we have different versions of the same sutta in different places, what you do is you compare those different versions and you see what they have in common. And that way you can tell whether something has been added to one sutta or maybe subtracted from one sutta. The Satipatthana Sutta, the way it is built up out of block elements. And because it is built up out of block elements, it's very easy to add to it. Just add another block, and then kind of bang, there it is. And we have very good reason to think that has happened in the history of Buddhism. And the reason we have very good reason to think so is because all of these suttas I just mentioned in different schools, different places, they're all different. How do they become different? Well, because things have been added. That's really the way. Things can also theoretically have been subtracted, but usually people don't subtract because it is the word of the Buddha, so it's kind of sacred. You don't want to subtract things. But if you add things, well, you're just adding more of the word of the Buddha, so no problem. I think that's kind of the psychology behind this, So things have been added. We know that for sure. And then the question is, what has been added? And if you look at the 4 satipatthanas, Kaya-nupassana, Veda-nupassana, Chitta-nupassana, Dhamma-nupassana, contemplation of body, feelings, mind, and Dhammas, which are like mental objects or whatever, if you look at those 4, look at the first one, contemplation of the body, Kaya-nupassana, it varies a lot in the different traditions. But what they have in common is the 31 parts of the body. That is in common in all the traditions. 4 elements common in all the traditions bar 1. So in other words, also very common. The cemetery contemplation is the third most thing in common. But the least in common is mindfulness of breathing, sati sampajanya we see here, and the 4 postures. That gets up to the 6 different meditations or 6 different areas that we have in the Theravada Satipatthana Sutta. Those are the 3 least in common. So mindfulness of breathing does not belong there. Sati Sampajanya, this passage we just have been looking at, does not actually, very likely, does not belong in the Satipatthana Sutta, nor the 4 postures. That is really the conclusion that you have to come to. So you may think that it's strange that Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, does not belong there. And the reason it doesn't belong there is because Anapanasati belongs to the entire Satipatthana, not in one place. So it's actually misleading to have it in the Kaya-nupassana. It belongs to the entire Satipatthana Sutta, all the 4 areas. And that is what you find when you go to the Anapanasati Sutta. That's exactly what it says. You fulfill all the 4 Satipatthanas by doing mindfulness of breathing. And Sati Sampajanya, as we just have been looking at now, also, it is not strange at all that it doesn't belong there. And the reason is because it actually belongs earlier on the path. It belongs as part of right effort. And this is kind of the idea I was trying to make. You have the sense restraint sometimes coming before Sati Sampajanya, sometimes Sati Sampajanya coming before sense restraint. They all revolve around right effort, coming after the ordinary silas. So I think the evidence historically and from the sutta is actually fairly good evidence that this is the case. And it changes a little bit about how we think about meditation, what real meditation is. In Buddhism, meditation is not about what you do in daily life. That has a different name. It's called sense restraint. It's called, it has a different name. Meditation means you close your eyes, you watch the breath. That demands a higher kind of mindfulness that is almost impossible to have during ordinary life. And that is why these stages are important, because with a lesser mindfulness you cannot achieve the same thing as you can achieve when the mindfulness is greater, as it should be during meditation practice. Even during meditation you will notice that in the beginning when you start out, mindfulness can be quite weak. And then as you progress, mindfulness becomes more powerful, and that enables the meditation to happen. And if that is true, it means that your mindfulness in daily life also usually will be very weak in the same way. It will not have the strength as it will have when your meditation really is taking off. And so the idea of meditation during daily life doesn't really, to my mind, belong in the suttas. So when we do whatever it is that you do during your daily life, you don't try just to be aware. That is not the point, because that's kind of what meditation would imply. Just be aware and then you're meditating. No, instead what we should be doing is to keep a sense of purity about ourselves in daily life. This is what right effort is about. So we are aware of what's happening in our mind. And when we see the desires and defilements arise, then we take a different route. We use the wisdom. That is what we should be able to do. And that already is difficult enough. Yeah, this is already really, really hard to do consistently in daily life. But that is really kind of the holy grail, if you like, if you can say that in Buddhism, of what we're trying to do on this path. And then when you come to meditation, you sit down, this really strong mindfulness happens, then you can meditate. It happens when you sit down instead. So this is how I view these things. So could it be that I'm wrong? I don't think so. Of course, everyone is wrong every now and again, so please think for yourself. Don't just take on board what I say, but of course I think I'm right, because that's what everyone thinks. And I am no different from all of those people who think they are right. So this is not a difference between Mahayana and Theravada. It's a difference within Theravada, different viewpoints of the same thing. I think what I have said now is probably will be considered not very orthodox. Yeah, very few people would probably know that this argument even exists. To be honest with you, but it does exist because I have just made it. Yeah. Yeah, please.
This about, bringing, and about to speak. I've never been taught this by all the great Chinese monks and nuns.
Yeah.
It's only when it's taught by brown robe monks and nuns.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's distinctive.
It is distinctive.
And it's disturbing because I thought that perhaps that's more original.
Say again?
This teaching of, bringing, because I've never heard from the Chinese side, ever throughout my life.
Yeah.
This
is the thing. It's like, sometimes the distinction between Mahayana and Theravada, sometimes it's small, and sometimes certain Theravadins agree more with certain Mahayanas than they agree with other Theravadins, and so it's all very complicated in that way. And a lot of the people in Mahayana Buddhism, they practice what is essentially just the same thing as we practice.
Because whatever you say is perhaps new or in your interpretation, to me that is just plain consistent with what I learned from the great Chinese monks and nuns.
Good,
and they keep it very low profile. Yeah.
Okay, good, yeah.
You mentioned, Ajahn, that Sabbasa Sutta. Just came to my mind in that sutta that in the first one, Dassana Pahatabba, that Sampajañña is translated as wisdom, isn't it, in there? In the Sabbasa Sutta, very first type of defilement, Dassana Pahatabba.
Okay. I think it's usually Yoniso Manasikara you have in there. I don't think you have Sampajañña in there.
No? I think slightly lower than Yoniso Manasikara. I think
is it?
I'm not.
Okay.
I've just thought about it.
All right. Okay. Let's check it out and see see what's going on there.
I think Sampajañña is.
Let's see. I'm not sure how to get. Let's see if I can get access to this. I'm going to reduce the size a little bit because it's very hard to work with this. So let's see what we can do.
Yeah, you're on the right.
So it is
Sabbasava
Sutta. Why is it not found? Maybe I need to connect to the internet. Is that right?
Maybe I got it mixed up, but definitely Yoniso Manasikara is there, and one who knows Yoniso Manasikara and one who doesn't know Yoniso Manasikara.
Definitely there. Yeah.
That is there, like
absolutely.
that.
Yeah. But we will provide the service to you, Venerable, Honorable Ananda, and we will.
That's the one, Ajahn. That's the one.
So here we are. So let's just put them side by side. So we get the Pali in there, and
not that one. That's.
I'm just searching for it. No results. So can't find it. So
can't find it.
I don't think it's there. No. Just searching Sampajañña. Yeah.
Oh.
No Sampajañña.
Somewhere else. Yeah.
In the beginning. Yeah.
In the very first one.
So this is the first one. This is the Dasanapahata. Yeah, you have here Dasanapahata, to be abandoned by seeing. Yeah. And it is mostly it is about Yoniso Manasikara all the way through. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No. Okay, please. Yeah. So. It is norm. I think it is not. It is translated as, I think, Bhikkhu as clear comprehension or full awareness sometimes, and then situational awareness with Bhante Sujato. I don't think it's usually translated as wisdom. Yono Manasikara can be translated as wise attention sometimes. So yeah, I think Bhante Sujato's most recent one is rational attention. I think he has. So he always likes to come up with some newfangled renderings. Okay. Yes, please.
My question is about fully enlightenment happened to the Buddha's followers when he was giving a sermon or giving a talk. So just my mind just wondering, this is probably not today's teaching.
Okay.
So let's say they've achieved jhana through not Buddhism but through their own practices. And they have achieved that, and they didn't have the right view. So all they're doing is being in the moment and listening, and then all of a sudden they achieve. Yeah. Is that how it comes?
Yeah, I think that's the way it can happen. If you already have these jhanas already, and then the right view comes, and then you start to see things rightly, then it can happen very fast. Yeah,
because so not in meditation, it just comes wherever you are.
Yeah, I mean you have to have some meditation because your mind has to be pure, right? So if you haven't had any deep meditations recently, you will have defilements. In that case, it won't work. You always have to go via samadhi. But if you have had those samadhi experiences recently, your mind will still be very pure, and then that may actually work. Yeah, those cases.
So is it also like momentary, or is it like I'm just thinking that perhaps the whole process of it must be taking more than a one mind moment. To reach enlightenment, there must be a process to it.
There is a process, but the actual insight is momentary. Yeah, so there is a process leading up to. I mean, the whole path is a process, preparing the mind, making the mind ready for that insight. And it may take a while. You may have to hear it a few times, and then one day, when all the causes and conditions are powerful enough, or the mind is developed enough in the right way, then it happens like that. So sometimes you have this discussion in Buddhism whether the path is gradual or momentary, yeah, and actually it's both, yeah, it's both gradual and momentary. You have to build up the causes and conditions, and then when you're ready, bang, it happens, yeah. So yeah. Anyone else? Do you want to say something, Nicholas, or are you? No? Not want to say anything. Okay. Yeah. Eddie wants to say something? Okay, Eddie. Keep it short, Eddie. Yeah, please.
Ajahn Brahmali.
Yeah.
To tell the truth, I've been battling myself. I want to say something, share something, but I've been battling with myself. Oh, you've been talking too much, Eddie, Yeah, and then I say, don't be silly. Just, stay, but whatever, with a good intention.
It's better if you don't share, because it's not about sharing, it's about asking questions. So please ask questions rather than sharing.
Oh, but this one, is it sharing or just tell you, okay? Yeah. You just see whether it's right or not. Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right.
Regarding Prem's question,
yeah.
He was talking about when you're seeing things and hearing things, okay? How do they blend? Do they, not? All right, yeah. So from my understanding, that's from Malaysia, I think, okay, when you're seeing this thing, okay, there's that thinking and feeling, it comes very quickly, one by one, okay, when yeah, and then the whole idea is, okay, for our well-being is it's one by one, you have to put in more positive thinking, more positive feeling in us now to up ourselves, then we are okay. Whatever we see or hear, what I think. If more negative feeling this thing, then we are down, I think. And that coincides with the 5 aggregates to the feelings, everything. That's how I want to say. Is this taking over you, or is this asking or sharing? Is it okay like that or no? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I'm very reluctant to,
Yes.
Sorry if I offend anybody, just by.
So what's the question? What is the question, Eddie?
Well, just do you think what my thinking is
okay.
right or wrong?
Okay.
The question,
Yeah. So the answer is that when you talk about feelings, if you have some good spiritual feelings, like you have built up some good feelings because of your good conduct or whatever, then of course the eyes and the defilements of the world will be much less interesting to you, and so you'll be able to withstand them much more. So we build up those other good feelings, and that means that we have something that we can deal with. We don't give rise to the negative attachments or whatever in the world so much. So in that sense, yes, building up those good feelings is really a very important part of it. Yeah. All right. Is it? Yeah, just as long as you keep it reasonably short. Yeah, and then yeah. Okay. Anything else? Everyone is happy. Yeah. Okay. So let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.